Somewhere between the ring, the recording booth, and a filter that could bend the laws of physics, Claressa Shields decided this was going to be her week. It was not. Roll the tape, cue the drama, and pull up a chair, because what unfolded across the last 72 hours of the Claressa Shields news cycle is not a scandal. It is a case study. Welcome back to the front row, the only place on this internet where we open the folder everybody else keeps sealed shut. No name is too big. No timeline is too messy. No verdict is too spicy. Pull up a chair and let the receipts read themselves, because tonight, Claressa Shields is the exhibit, the evidence, and the closing argument all in one. Now let me tell you what the streets have been chewing on, because the mocker just met the mirror, and the mirror had no mercy at all. Claressa Shields walked into an Ariel Hawaii interview thinking she was about to run the room, and by the time she walked out, half the internet had stitched her freestyle, her face, and her love life into one exhibit. The questions were shady. The answers from Claressa were shadier. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, the man everybody keeps calling somebody's husband got dragged into it too. If you have been asking why this whole Claressa Shields storyline refuses to die, sit tight, because tonight we are threading every single needle in this circus, and we are not skipping a stitch. Let me set the table for you. Claressa sat down for what looked like a normal press run. Normal, at least, until the interviewer casually asked her to spit some bars. And instead of laughing it off, instead of pivoting like a seasoned public figure would, Claressa took the bait. She squinted. She stalled. She looked into the middle distance like a student who forgot the homework was due. Then she opened her mouth and delivered a verse that sounded like it was assembled inside a group chat at 3 in the morning. It happens. Freestyles are hard. But when your entire brand upgrade involves signing to a record label your boyfriend basically curates, the bar is different. The bar is not on the floor. The bar is expected to be somewhere in the sky. And Claressa Shields, respectfully, could not find the ladder. And here is where the front row perks up, because Claressa did not just fumble the freestyle. She revealed, in that same interview, that she does not really know Remy Ma's music. Let me read that back for the people in the cheap seats. Claressa Shields does not really know the music of the woman who is still, technically, the wife of the man Claressa is publicly dating. That is not a stumble. That is a confession dressed up as small talk. And if you needed a single sentence to understand why this saga refuses to leave the timeline, that is your sentence right there. Everything else tonight is just footnotes on that one admission. Now, listen closely, because the phrase I am about to hand you is the one you will be quoting for the rest of the week. Claressa Shields has what I am calling unloved girl programming. That is the diagnosis. That is the file. That is the sticker on the folder. And before anybody tries to twist my words in the comments, let me define my terms, because I already know some of you will misread this on purpose. Unloved girl programming is not about being unattractive. It is about being told, repeatedly and loudly, by the people around you and the internet around you, that you were unattractive during the formative years when you were building your sense of self. That messaging does not evaporate when you get famous. It embeds. It becomes the operating system running underneath everything you do in public. It is why every single time Claressa opens her mouth to defend herself, the first sentence out of her body is a defense of her looks. Not her belts. Not her business. Her looks. That is the tell. That is the fingerprint. And if you rewatch her old interviews back to back, you will see the same pattern repeat like a stuck record. Claressa Shields never talks about herself without correcting a mirror that is not in the room. Some of you last time we talked about this were confused, so let me clarify once more. Nobody with a functioning brain is calling this woman ugly. That is not the point. The point is that Claressa carries herself like a person who was called ugly so many times that the word became furniture in her mind. She rearranges her whole personality around it. She brings it up in conversations where nobody mentioned it. She debates it with strangers who never accused her of anything. She wears it like a chip on her shoulder that keeps getting bigger every time somebody looks at her sideways. And every time Claressa brings it up unprompted, she confirms the diagnosis all over again. The programming is loud. The programming is running. The programming is deciding her media strategy. And no follower count in the world will overwrite that code until she stops feeding it. Now let me pivot to the second layer, because the interviewer, whether by accident or by design, kept tossing grenades into the room and Claressa Shields kept diving on them. He brought up Remy Ma. He brought up MVP promotions. He asked about the freestyle. He asked about her love list of women rappers she admires. Claressa named Lil Kim. She named Foxy Brown. She named Eve. She named Cardi B and Megan and Glorilla. And when the interviewer, sweet as poison, asked Claressa about Remy Ma, her face folded. She said she does not know many of her songs. My friend, my dear friend, the mocker just met the mirror once more. Because in a genre where lineage is everything, Claressa managed to skip the one name that matters most to her current situation. Because here's the thing. If you spend as much time as Claressa Shields spends monitoring what people say about her, you are absolutely aware of the woman who set the modern standard for female rap warfare. Everybody in that lane knows Remy's catalog. Everybody. You do not walk into hip-hop, sign to a label being built around your boyfriend, publicly date a man still legally married to a rap legend, and then pretend the legend's music never crossed your ears. That is not humility. That is not honesty. That is a poker face missing 3 cards. And Ariel Hawaii, whether he meant to or not, called Claressa's bluff on live cameras. The video is out there. The clip has been screenshotted, subtitled, Meme Feed, and mailed to every group chat between Atlanta and the Bronx. Let us keep threading. Because the same interview eventually swung around to Cadia Green, and this is where the story gets stickier. Claressa has been publicly accused of celebrating the moment Cadia suffered a brain bleed in the ring. That accusation is heavy. That accusation is career-changing. And I want to be fair here, because on this one, Claressa's clarification actually holds up if you read the timeline honestly. She was not celebrating the injury. She was celebrating the fact that a fighter who had been aggressively marketed as her future opponent had just been beaten by Lonnie Daniels. Claressa did not know, at that moment, that a brain bleed was in play. Nobody knew. The medical reveal came later. And on that specific point, the receipts do vindicate Claressa. That much I will give her. I am not in the business of stacking counts that do not fit. But here is where the vindication ends, because in the exact same breath, Claressa said out loud that she had privately told the co-founder of MVP Promotions not to book that fight. She said she warned them. She said she told them it would ruin the storyline. Now I want you to sit with that sentence for a second. Claressa is telling us that she personally advised a rival promotion company how to sequence its fights, and then in the next breath, she is claiming she does not care about that promotion at all. Pick a lane. Because the whole point of pretending you have no interest is that you do not pop up in the meeting notes. And Claressa Shields keeps popping up in the meeting notes of every organization she claims she is done with. And this is Claressa's pattern. This is the recurring glitch in the code. Every time she opens her mouth to distance herself from something, the details she volunteers pull her closer to it. She says she does not care, but she cared enough to call. She says she does not know Remy Ma's music, but she monitors every post that mentions her. She says she is not with somebody's husband, but she cannot say the word divorce without a footnote. The denials and the receipts keep sitting on the same shelf, and the internet is not blind. The internet is, in fact, taking notes with a pen the size of a baseball bat. Now let me shift the lens, because while Claressa Shields was doing all of this in one interview, a completely different woman was doing her makeup in a completely different room and casually detonating one of the cleanest shade grenades of the year. Cadia, the daughter of the head of Win Records, 7 months pregnant, fresh polish, full ring light, and in the middle of a soft, breezy get ready with me video, she looks into the camera and says, and I want you to catch every word of this, that she has never been with a married man. She says it. Then she says it again. Twice. In the same clip. For emphasis. On the label her father built. And every viewer with a working timeline understood exactly which married man was being politely unnamed. If you are new to this whole ecosystem, let me remind you of the geography. Cadia's father runs Win Records. Papoose signed to Win Records. Claressa Shields is publicly dating Papoose. Everybody sees everybody at the office. So when the woman whose family runs the label goes on camera and specifically says she has never been with a married man, and then repeats it, that is not a random affirmation. That is a headline. That is a boundary drawn in permanent marker across a hallway everybody has to walk through. And every artist and executive on that roster now has to decide, in silence, which side of that boundary they are standing on. And I want to be delicate here, because Cadia is pregnant, and she is entitled to peace. But peace does not usually come with double takes. If you never dated a married man, you say it once, and you move on. You do not repeat it. You do not underline it. You do not press it into the camera like a stamp. You only repeat that sentence when there is a specific person in the building you want the sentence to land on. Everybody understood the address on the envelope. Everybody. Even Claressa understood, because the very next interview cycle, Claressa Shields was still defending the divorce timeline like a woman trying to convince a jury. Which brings us to the moment that broke the internet for exactly 48 hours. Somebody, finally, sat Claressa down and asked her the question that every timeline had been screaming at her for months. How much longer are you willing to be with somebody's husband? And instead of laughing, instead of deflecting, instead of pivoting to her belts and her body of work, Claressa dove in. She said, pause. She said, that is not somebody's husband. She said, we hate to say the word divorce. And in doing so, Claressa wrote a scene that felt scripted by a writer's room that had never met an actual married person in real life. Because here is the thing about divorce as a legal event. A divorce is not a vibe. A divorce is not a feeling. A divorce is not a mood you can announce on a stage. A divorce is a court order signed by a judge with a stamp and a docket number and a date. Until that paperwork is signed, sealed, and filed, the man is still a legal husband. Full stop. This is not opinion. This is not shade. This is the state of New York and every state in this union agreeing that a marriage is a marriage until the state says otherwise. So when Claressa stands on the podium and insists she is not with somebody's husband because a divorce is being processed, she is not disproving the accusation. Claressa is confirming it while wearing a smile. And the smile, at that point, is doing more work than the argument. And Claressa doubled down. She said, and I want you to hear this line clean, that if we are going to call him a husband, we should also call Remy a wife. My beloved audience, everybody has been calling Remy Ma a wife. That is exactly what she has been called. That is exactly what the internet has been screaming at Claressa for months. Nobody, in any comment section, in any pillow talk video, in any radio interview, ever hesitated to call Remy a wife. Remy is the wife. That has been the entire premise of the drama. So the fact that Claressa is standing there insisting we finally call Remy a wife, as if that is some undiscovered fact, tells you that Claressa is not reading the room she is standing in the middle of. She is reading a different room, a smaller room, a room curated by the same small circle that lets Claressa filter her photos and never tells her the filter is showing. Let me stay on the filter for a moment, because the filter is where this whole saga becomes cinematic. Claressa Shields dropped a set of photos this week that, and I say this with my full chest, look like they were rendered by a movie studio. The skin is glass. The jawline is sculpted. The eyes are enlarged. The nose is narrowed. And on top of those photos, this woman, this same woman who calls other women out for their surgeries and their edits, wrote in her own caption that she has grown into her beauty, and that her heart has always been pure as this white fur. Pure as white fur. My friend, the photo has more layers than a wedding cake, and the caption has more theology than a Sunday sermon. And the audience, watching from the pews, could not stop laughing. And this is where the internet went to work. Comedian Iya J took one look at those photos and delivered what might be the roast of the summer. She said the filter needed its own award category. She said the reflection did not recognize itself. She said the FBI should hire the photographer because they can make anybody disappear. She said the phone camera looked at the picture and requested a new user. She said the smile was the second biggest curve in the frame. She said the picture had more editing than a Marvel movie. And the streets ran with every single line. Every reply guy, every quote tweet, every duet on that video was another shovel in the excavation of Claressa's public image. Now here is the tension. Claressa gets to post whatever picture she wants. That is her prerogative. Every woman on this internet has a right to a filter. That is not the crime. The crime is the caption. The crime is the sermon on top of the fantasy. The crime is standing on the digital pulpit and lecturing the rest of us about authenticity while your face in the photograph is doing its own choreography behind your back. If you want to filter, filter. Filter with joy. Filter with abandon. But do not filter and then preach. Because the moment you preach, the audience gets to fact-check the sermon. And in the case of Claressa Shields, the fact-check was brutal, immediate, and permanent. Take a breath. Because we are only halfway through this week. There is still the meet and greet to talk about. There is still Mosley to talk about. There is still Papoose's freestyle to talk about. Yes, Papoose's freestyle. In the year of our internet, we are still talking about Papoose's freestyle. And no, I do not need a moment to compose myself. I have been composing myself since the first bar landed. Let us start with the meet and greet. And I have to be honest, because credit is credit. The turnout for Claressa was real. People showed up. Fans lined up. Photographs happened. A 61-year-old woman even walked up and joked about wanting to get in the ring with Claressa. There were kids. There were phones. There were smiles. Whatever else you can say about Claressa Shields, there is a base that pulls up for her. That is not nothing. That is a metric. That is a piece of the brand that is actually functional. But then the same event brought out Mosley, quietly rocking a Win Records shirt, and the meaning of that image is doing more work than any freestyle Papoose has ever recorded. Mosley, a Hall of Fame fighter, a man whose word once carried weight in the entire sport. And now he is affiliated with the label being propped up as Claressa's home base. Which, on paper, sounds like a win. But if you have been paying attention to Shane's recent commentary, you know his fight predictions have been shakier than a folding chair. He picked wrong on the Canelo-Crawford narrative. He has said things that made trainers physically wince. So while it is nice to see him step into a Win Records shirt, the cosign is not what it would have been a decade ago. It is a cosign with an asterisk. And in the boxing business, asterisks matter. Claressa Shields knows that better than most, because her own asterisks are the reason her camp keeps stacking new cosigns. Which brings us to Papoose, and I promise you I am not making this up. In the middle of the meet and greet, Papoose stepped up to the microphone and delivered a freestyle that referenced fentanyl-laced verses, yoga stretchers, Snow White with no dwarves, and Skeletor. Skeletor. He compared a rival to a cartoon skeleton king from a 1980s action figure line. Whatever you thought Papoose was doing with his career, whatever weight you thought he still carried in the culture, that freestyle was the receipt. That freestyle was the punctuation mark at the end of a very long, very complicated sentence. And Claressa stood there smiling like it was going to top the Billboard charts by morning. And here is the meta-observation. Papoose keeps showing up at these events because the events are, functionally, the only place his shine is guaranteed. When he stands next to Claressa at a meet and greet, the cameras find him. When he grabs a microphone at a boxing press day, the internet clips him. He is not headlining anything. He is not selling out anything. He is a satellite, and the satellite has to stay in orbit around a bigger body or it drifts into the vacuum. That is the physics of this relationship, whether anybody wants to say it out loud or not. And Claressa, right now, is the bigger body in that orbit, whether she wants that responsibility or not. Meanwhile, Dirrell, who is actually one of the more genuine figures in this whole storyline, stood right there next to Shane Mosley and did what a real corner does. He held the line. He posted up. He looked focused. Because whatever anybody thinks of Claressa's public messiness, she does have a small circle of people who actually seem to be there for her instead of there for the camera. That distinction matters. That distinction is the difference between an entourage and a team. And the fact that Papoose keeps hovering around the camera side of that line, while Andre stays on the team side, tells you exactly which category he belongs to. Claressa Shields has one true corner in this ecosystem, and it is not the one holding the microphone. Alright, let me tie the ropes tighter, because we still have the MVP arc to close, and this is the piece nobody has connected properly yet. Claressa said MVP Promotions has always been against the Claressa Shields brand. She said they have tried to discredit her for years. She said she was never banned from boxing. She said the press release about the incident was fabricated. And she wrapped all of that in her signature move, which is a rapid-fire recital of her follower counts across 3 platforms. 1.8 million on Instagram, 215,000 on YouTube, 560,000 on Facebook, which she briefly, gloriously, misquoted as 5,600,000 before the math caught up with her. And this is Claressa's fundamental defense mechanism, which is to convert every accusation into an inventory of her metrics. You called her a bad partner. She reads her belts. You called her a bad interview. She reads her follower count. You said she is delusional. She reads her purse. It is a defense strategy that works if the audience is only counting money. But most of the audience, and this is the part her camp keeps missing, is not counting money. The audience is counting character. And you cannot spreadsheet your way out of a character audit. No amount of endorsement money spent on a Win Records tour bus is going to sponsor the trust Claressa Shields keeps hemorrhaging in these interviews. Because let us zoom all the way out. Let us pretend for a moment that none of the personal drama exists. Let us pretend the divorce is finalized, the freestyle never happened, the photos were never filtered, and the interviews were smooth. What is the actual boxing case for Claressa? She has, and this is not an insult, 3 knockouts across an entire career. She has repeatedly claimed she can beat professional male fighters, including Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, and a Triple G who is nearly retired. Claressa has said she drops men in sparring. She has said she busts men. But when she steps into the ring against women in her own division, the finishing power is missing. The knockdowns are rare. The knockouts are rarer. And the arithmetic is loud. Now, I am not here to diminish her belts. Claressa has real hardware. She is a legitimate champion in multiple divisions. That is not up for debate. But when you talk trash the way Claressa talks trash, when you brand